do kiss people on the cheek. I do kiss people on the hand. I do embrace people. I do hug people, men and women. I do on occasion say, ciao Bella. On occasion, I do slip and say sweetheart or darling or honey. I do banter with people. I do tell jokes, some better than others. I am the same person in public as I am in private. You have seen me do it on TV through all my briefings and for 40 years before that. I try to put people at ease.
New York Governor Andrew Cuomo defends his behavior hours after the state's attorney general outlined the results of their investigation into the sexual harassment allegations in blistering detail, saying the governor created a hostile work environment rife with fear and intimidation. Nearly a dozen women came forward, including a state trooper on his security detail. Tonight, the president is calling on him to resign. What's next for the embattled governor? America's largest city takes an unprecedented step to try and slow the Delta variant, moving to require proof of vaccinations for indoor dining and other public venues. What you need to know tonight as vaccination rates continue to climb. President Biden's message to America to try to help slow the surge. And overseas tonight, Delta variant cases are dropping significantly in the UK. What could it mean for the surge happening here right now? The harrowing body camera video just released from the crews first to arrive to the tragedy in Surfside, what they saw and heard. We're joined by the black man who says that he was jumped by two white men and pinned to a tree as they threatened to, quote, get a noose. 1 year later, he says he's now facing charges in that incident.
Never did I imagine that folks would attack me and beat me and threaten me with a noose.
It's the phone call that he says changed his life. We're joined by the former lieutenant colonel who was so shocked by what he heard then President Trump saying, he says he had to speak up. Tonight, he's out with a new book, Here, Right Matters.
The White House, my house, the house I was working on a daily basis, was attacking me.
And the triumphant return in Tokyo, star gymnast Simone Biles opening up about the unexpected hurdle she faced in her fight to get back on the mat. And tonight, the medal she earned with the world watching in her final event. Good evening, everyone. I'm Lindsay Davis. Thank you so much for streaming with us. Some damning words tonight from the top investigator for the state of New York in what she calls deeply disturbing conduct that corrodes the very character of the state's government. State Attorney General Letitia James revealing the bombshell findings of her extensive investigation into the allegations against Governor Andrew Cuomo. James laid out the results today and what her office concluded about the sexual harassment claims made by 11 women against the governor. In the end, she said Cuomo, quote, sexually harassed current and former state employees in violation of both federal and state laws. The detailed report is 165 pages long, including the testimony of 179 witnesses, documenting a pattern of behavior from 2013 until at least 2020. A few hours later, Cuomo made a statement directly to the media, refuting the results of the investigation, saying, I never touched anyone inappropriately or made inappropriate sexual advances. Tonight, the governor is facing growing calls to resign, including from the President of the United States, as well as the mayor of New York City. Ariel Reshef leads us off tonight from Albany on what comes next.
Tonight, the independent investigation reaching a sweeping conclusion.
Governor Andrew Cuomo sexually harassed current and former New York State employees by engaging in unwelcome and non-consensual touching and making numerous offensive comments of a suggestive and sexual nature that created a hostile work environment for women.
11 women coming forward to accuse the governor, investigators finding them all to be credible.
I believe them.
The team, assembled by New York State Attorney General Letitia James, spoke to 179 people over 5 months, collecting 74,000 pieces of evidence. Today, they accuse the governor of violating state and federal laws, presenting their findings in stark detail.
In the executive mansion, the governor hugged executive assistant number 1 and reached under her blouse to grab her breast. This was the culmination of a pattern of inappropriate sexual conduct. including numerous close and intimate hugs, where the governor held her so closely that her breasts were pressed against his body.
Investigators say a state trooper, a member of Cuomo's own security detail, described a pattern of harassment.
In an elevator, while standing behind the trooper, he ran his finger from her neck down her spine and said, "Hey, you." Another time, she was standing holding the door open for the governor. As he passed, he took his open hand and ran it across her stomach from her belly button to the hip where she keeps her gun. She told us that she felt completely violated.
And investigators say her account was corroborated by other state troopers who saw it all. And then there was Charlotte Bennett, an executive assistant who confided in Cuomo last year that she had been sexually assaulted in college. He allegedly asked her to describe what had happened, and investigators say it didn't stop there. Bennett filed a complaint, but the governor's staff allegedly buried it, and she ended up leaving her job. Today, Cuomo claimed he was only trying to counsel her because he has a close relative who was also sexually assaulted.
I thought I could help her work through a difficult time. I did ask her questions I don't normally ask people. I did ask her how she was doing and how she was feeling. And I did ask questions to try to see if she had positive, supportive dating relationships.
The governor declaring the investigation does a disservice to, quote, legitimate sexual harassment victims.
I never touched anyone inappropriately or made inappropriate sexual advances.
In a highly produced video, he showed pictures of himself hugging various people and of politicians embracing other politicians. The message, nothing to see here.
I try to put people at ease. I try to make them smile. I try to connect with them. And I try to show my appreciation and my friendship. I now understand that there are generational or cultural perspectives that, frankly, I hadn't fully appreciated. And I have learned from this.
Today, Charlotte Bennett tweeting a terse response, resign Governor Cuomo. Her call echoed by both New York senators and House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. And tonight, reporters asking President Biden.
Are you now calling on him to resign?
Yes.
Just a very simple and matter-of-fact yes there from the president. Ariel Dreshev joins us now from Albany, the capital of New York. Ariel, we just heard from President Biden. He thinks that Cuomo should resign. But so far, the governor has been unwilling to do that. So what happens next?
Well, Lindsay, tonight it is looking more and more like Governor Cuomo will be impeached by the state legislature. The Assembly Speaker saying it has become abundantly clear that Cuomo has lost the confidence of the Assembly's Democratic majority and that he can no longer remain in office.
And also explain to our viewers who became very familiar with impeachment on the federal level in recent years why, if it happened, it would look much different in New York.
Yeah, so we're all getting up to speed on this. The governor and his aides essentially know, Lindsay, that if he were to be impeached, this would be the ball game here in Albany, different than what we see happen in Washington, D.C. And that is because the governor would have to essentially step back while he's mounting a defense. And insiders say that Governor Cuomo would possibly resign in that instance if he knows he'll be impeached. Lindsay?
Ariel Dreshev, our thanks to you. And joining us now for more on this is Shauna Lloyd, a civil rights attorney with the Cochran firm and an ABC News contributor. Thanks so much for joining us, Shauna. Governor Cuomo is accused in an investigation conducted by the New York Attorney General of sexually harassing nearly a dozen women in and out of state government, and he allegedly worked to retaliate against one of his accusers. The New York Lieutenant Governor called the behavior, quote, repulsive and said no one is above the law, but no criminal charges have been filed. Can you explain why?
Absolutely, Lindsay. There's a little bit of a difference here. The federal violation is creating an environment where the sexual harassment is so pervasive that it creates a hostile work environment, or there's some sort of adverse action towards your employment. That is a civil violation, and that's what they're alleging here. There's a very different standard for a criminal violation. A criminal violation has a different measure by which it's going to be sought to see if he measured up. Here, they're saying there was absolutely a civil possible violation that they are witnessing and that they're seeing with this pattern in practice, but it doesn't rise to the level of criminal charges.
So could he face any potential charges down the line? We know that the Albany District Attorney has asked for the supporting documentation.
Absolutely, there is a possibility of that. Typically, when we see those type of criminal charges coming down, it's typically because an accuser has gone and accused someone of this crime. Then you're going to see them look at the case and make a determination as to whether or not criminal charges should be brought.
And what option do the accusers here have?
The accusers have two options. There's always the criminal route, which is something people are pretty familiar with. You lodge a complaint, the police take a report, and they investigate. You can also lodge a civil lawsuit, which is what would be under this particular instance. The civil lawsuit is alleging that the sexual harassment was so pervasive it created a hostile work environment, and there are different remedies. And also, the accuser has a lot more ability to control the case when it's brought in the civil arena as opposed to the criminal arena.
Shauna Lloyd, our thanks to you. Appreciate your insight as always.
Thanks, Lindsay.
Next to the fight against COVID, New York City is now the first American jurisdiction requiring proof of vaccination at restaurants, gyms, performances, and other indoor activities. The mayor's message here is simple. In essence, if you want to have fun, you know what to do. Eva Pilgrim has more.
Tonight, New York City, the original epicenter of the coronavirus, announcing it will become the first city in the country to require proof of vaccination for a range of indoor activities.
If you're unvaccinated, unfortunately, you will not be able to participate in many things. That's the point we're trying to get across.
Starting September 13th, at restaurants, gyms, and entertainment venues, customers and workers will need to show vaccination proof on a city or state app or a physical card.
On the one hand, I don't like it, but I do think that the public health is more important than anything else.
But with COVID cases surging nearly 600% in New York City in the last month, the mayor calling the new mandate the key to the city's recovery. Late today, President Biden urging the private sector to require vaccinations.
This isn't easy, but I will have their backs and the backs of other private public sector leaders if they take such steps.
The president also calling out states who have banned mask mandates, including in schools, where young children are still not eligible to get a vaccine.
If you aren't going to help, at least get out of the way of the people who are trying to do the right thing. Use your power to save lives.
Vaccinations are ticking up, the biggest jumps in states with some of the highest infection rates. But every day, the number of Americans in hospitals is climbing. Today, 56,000, the most since February. From Florida to Louisiana, a record number of COVID patients.
I've never seen a disease do what the Delta variant is doing right now to our patient population.
Nearly all are unvaccinated, and many are filled with regret.
They are so sick and they are so scared, and for the most part they are so remorseful that they did not get this vaccination that all I can feel for them is such extreme sympathy.
And there is mounting concern for children. Pediatric COVID cases nearly doubling in the last week. At Texas Children's Hospital, a steady climb in new COVID patients.
So you don't think that you've actually hit the peak yet?
I don't think we've hit that peak yet. And the troubling part of this is that we're in early August. And with fall sports and school around the corner, that could be obviously a very potent combination.
Certainly disconcerting to hear that we have not yet hit the peak. Eva Pilgrim joins us now from Brooklyn. Eva, health officials are not yet recommending booster shots, but San Francisco General Hospital says that it will be offering an extra vaccine dose to people who got the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. Tonight, we know that the FDA is weighing in. What are they saying?
That's right, Lindsay. The hospital saying they'll give a Pfizer or Moderna vaccine to those who've requested it, calling it a supplemental dose. But the FDA's vaccine chief, Peter Marks, has weighed in, and he says they don't recommend taking things into your own hands, and it's not what you're supposed to do under the emergency use authorization. Lindsay?
All right, Eva Pilgrim, our thanks to you. Meanwhile, overseas in Great Britain, a surprising headline that caught our eye today. Despite the Delta variant still running rampant, COVID cases in the UK have dropped in recent weeks. So what's behind the decline, and what could it tell us about what may happen with the COVID surge here in the U.S.? Here's ABC's Julia McFarlane in London.
Britain is holding its breath. after Prime Minister Boris Johnson's government lifted all remaining COVID-19 restrictions in mid-July, despite the Delta variant running rampant.
It is right to proceed cautiously in the way that we are, but it's also right to recognise that this pandemic is far from over.
But then something peculiar happened. Cases have been falling steadily for weeks, and scientists around the globe can't quite figure out why.
I don't know that most of us were expecting to see that. Is that because this variant is so wildly contagious that you've actually seen the point arrive where most people have gotten infected, or at least enough anyway, that you're starting to get to herd immunity from natural infection?
More than once the worst-hit nation in Europe, Britain has had a tough time fighting COVID-19. Britain surged last year, producing the Kent or Alpha variant that went on to become the dominant strain of COVID-19 around the world. But now, in the midst of its third wave, cases have been falling since the easing of lockdown 2 weeks ago. The Delta variant now makes up 99% of new cases. But since July 15, the 7-day average of cases has dropped from over 45,000 down to just over 26,000 last week, a drop of more than 40%. Today, just under 22,000 new cases were reported. And deaths are a fraction of what they were in the height of the second wave. At its peak in January, Britain seeing an average of 1,383 deaths a day to roughly 77 deaths this past week. So what may be driving the decline in Britain?
Part of the reason for that is likely the vaccines working incredibly well, natural immunity, especially because the Delta variant ripped through the population, and of course, social distancing and masking that were sort of part of the fabric of the response.
Government figures estimate that 92% of people in England have antibodies, either from vaccination or previous infection of COVID-19. This week, Britain opening its doors to American tourists for the first time since travel restrictions began, leading to emotional reunions at the airport as transatlantic families are finally able to reconnect.
It means the world, especially as an 8-year-old child who hasn't seen his grandparents for a couple of years. It's a big chunk of his life, and I'm so thrilled for him that he can come here.
Fully vaccinated travellers for the US no longer having to quarantine for 10 days upon arrival into England. Now, all that's needed is proof of vaccination in US residency and to take COVID tests before and after arrival.
We are very excited to see the American tourists coming back to London. It has been a long time and we missed you guys.
And as the United States grapples with its own surge of the Delta variant, could the UK's recent dip offer a glimmer of hope for a potential US decline in the future?
There are some important caveats. The vaccine rollout has not gone as well here in the US, and we have major pockets of unvaccinated people. Those people will continue to be the host for the Delta variant, and because of that, I'm concerned that we will not necessarily be a mirror image of the UK.
Experts warn it's too soon for celebrations. While cases in the UK have declined in recent weeks, it comes after a mini surge earlier in July, widely attributed to the Euro 2020 soccer championships. Fueled by indoor transmission and densely packed crowds, cases shot up across the UK. And now the UK has reopened its doors, with festivals, nightclubs and other large gathering sites all having their restrictions lifted.
This is a really good signal for the rest of the world, but at the same time, we have to be incredibly concerned about rapid reopenings and resurgence of Delta or maybe a future variant. This is a story that we've seen play out over and over again through the pandemic.
Combined with the return of schools and universities in the fall, and scientists warn that numbers could be coming back up once again in September.
Lindsay, British lawmakers are clearly worried about that possibility of cases rising in the fall. UK media reporting that a booster vaccine program will be in place from next month. British adults over 50 and those with compromised immune systems will be among the first to be offered their third shot. Lindsay?
Julia, thank you. Next to the investigation now underway after a police officer was killed right outside of the Pentagon. Stephanie Ramos has the details.
The chaotic scene unfolding just steps from the Pentagon. Loudspeakers announcing a lockdown just after 10:30 this morning.
Attention all personnel, the Pentagon remains in lockdown due to ongoing police activity. Please remain in place until advised otherwise.
A Pentagon police officer was attacked
on the Metro bus platform. Gunfire was exchanged, and there were several casualties.
We were on lockdown because of police activity. We didn't really know what was happening.
Sources telling ABC News that the officer was stabbed and both the suspect and the officer were killed. Officers seen saluting a black van just before it left the hospital after officials gave the all clear. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin and Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Mark Milley, were at the White House meeting with President Biden at the time of the incident. Pentagon officials providing few details on the incident other than to say they are not searching for any suspects.
Lindsay, there is no known motive at this time. The defense secretary has ordered flags to be flown at half staff here at the Pentagon in honor of that fallen officer. Lindsay.
Stephanie, thanks so much. And tonight, for the first time, we're getting a glimpse, a real look at the horrors that first responders witnessed firsthand when they arrived on the scene of that deadly condo collapse in Florida. Victor Kendo has those details.
Is anybody there?
This is what 3 of the first Surfside police officers racing to the scene found the night of the deadly condo collapse.
Well, I can't see anything, man.
Painful screams heard in the background. This officer desperate to get closer.
Can we jump over this wall here? I can't see over.
The chaotic moments from June 24th captured on newly released body camera video.
Are you okay? Is anybody down there injured?
This officer apparently walking underneath the remaining part of the Champlain Tower South, cars falling into the now cratered garage.
Go this way, go this way. The garage floor fell.
This woman barely making it out, telling officers she worked overnight security at the building.
I don't even know how I made it out of there, through the grace of God.
As more first responders arrive, the disbelief setting in.
The whole back of the building's gone. I've never seen anything like this, bro.
The official death toll, a staggering 98 people. With millions of pounds of concrete removed, the site is now clear. The federal investigation into how the building collapsed is well underway. Lindsay?
Yeah, still so many questions outstanding there, Victor. Thank you. When we come back, the unruly passenger duct taped in his seat, what he's accused of doing and why the nation's largest flight attendants union is defending their own tonight. The colonel at the center of former President Trump's first impeachment trial is now out with a new memoir and joins us to talk about his role in history. But up next, you may remember this video, a black man who alleges that he was assaulted by 2 white men last year. Now he faces charges too. The rationale has some scratching their heads.
With so much at stake, so much on the line, more Americans turn here than any place else. ABC News World News Tonight with David Muir, America's #1 most watched newscast, now streaming on ABC News Live.
Admit it, these days, what you need to know
seems to change just about every day.
What is it that you really want to know, need to know?
To help you not just get through your day,
but to make the most of it. Feel smarter.
Feel better.
Feel happier.
Well, how about a 3rd hour of Good Morning America?
GMA 3, what you need to know. Now streaming on ABC News Live.
It's all about you.
Robin Roberts, George Stephanopoulos, Michael Strahan. Wake up with America's #1 most watched morning show. ABC's
Good Morning America.
The world may feel out of your control, but your happiness doesn't have to be. Learn the secrets to happiness. Listen to the 10% Happier podcast, free on Apple Podcasts.
ABC News honored winner for the 2nd straight year with the Edward R. Murrow Award for Overall Excellence in Television. ABC News, America's #1 news source. Now streaming on ABC News Live 2020. True crime, cinematic, real-life drama, stunning, the unthinkable. Follow the clues, The Hunt. True crime 2020. Now streaming on ABC News Live. This is what being live is all about. This is ABC News Live.
All right, we're going to move back. Let's move back.
We're surrounded by people
squeezing into this bomb shelter.
We're on an urgent delivery run.
Not afraid to go there.
So my question, Mr. President, what are you so afraid of?
Breaking news, live events.
This is the moment.
Streaming straight to you, anytime, anywhere.
You just met one friend right here.
You're watching ABC News Live. Thanks for streaming with us.
Now, when it matters most, the straightforward facts. ABC News is America's #1 news. Good Morning America, #1 in the morning, 9 years running. World News Tonight with David Muir, #1 in the evening with America's most watched newscast. 2020, the #1 news magazine on Friday nights. The View, the #1 daytime talk show. And ABC News Live, #1 in streaming news. ABC News is America's #1 news.
The nation's largest flight attendant union is demanding that 2 Frontier Airlines flight attendants on paid leave get reinstated after they duct taped a passenger to his seat. This all took place this weekend on a flight from Philly to Miami. Police say the man was drinking and then groped the breasts of 2 flight attendants. In the video, you can see him punching a third person just after he claimed that his parents were worth $2 million. We turn now to an update on a story that we first brought you last summer when a local activist named Vox Booker said that he was jumped by a group of white men near Bloomington, Indiana on July 4th, saying that they pinned him to a tree and threatened to, quote, get a noose after they say that he and his friends trespassed on private property. You may remember this video that went viral showing part of the incident.
Let him go. Let him go, dude. Let him go. Let him go, please. Let him go.
But more than a year later, Booker says that he's now facing charges himself in the altercation. Vox Booker, kind enough to join us tonight. Vox, 2 of the men involved in the altercation last year with you received felony charges and are due in court later this month. But now the special prosecutor from Monroe County has filed felony assault and misdemeanor trespassing charges against you as well. Explain why you believe this is happening.
First of all, to have charges filed against you in your own hate crime is outrageous. I believe the motivation behind this is simply that for the last year, the special prosecutor, Sonia Learcamp, has pressured me that I should forgive these men. She's talked about this idea she had of a forgiveness tool and how good it would be for the community, and seemed more concerned about that than my actual welfare.
But why do you feel that she is going forward with pressing charges against you?
I think it's an intimidation technique. I don't know if she really means to carry these all the way through, or if her intent is just to get me to back down and not make a fuss when she dismisses charges against these men.
We did reach out to the Monroe County Special Prosecutor's Office, and she said that she is, quote, ethically restrained from commenting upon the evidence prior to trial, and that she is, quote, doing my best to apply the law to the facts. What evidence do you have to back your claim that these charges are being filed because you didn't participate in the restorative justice effort?
Well, one of the things is the participation agreement itself that was first drafted. The first draft that she gave me locked me into confidentiality. It contractually obligated me to agree with the dismissal of charges, and it dictated that I would participate in a joint press conference.
Now, David Hennessy, the attorney for 2 of the other parties, had no comment on your charges, but has said in the past that you were, quote, the instigator and the agitator, and that you punched one of the men 3 times and had to be restrained. What's your response to that?
It's the oldest trope in the book that the black man is the aggressor. It would ask one to believe that I would go up to a group of drunken white men wearing Confederate flag hats and grossly outnumbered and suddenly start assaulting them.
So you're saying that you never punched anyone there?
No. So the initial confrontation started after I walked away. It was obvious that it was going to potentially be a dangerous situation. I walked away. The gentleman, I use that term loosely, stalked me like an animal through the woods, caught me from behind, and assaulted me. And so,
but a lot of people are going to say, though, but did you punch them? And so I just want to get just a no or yes answer to that.
Well, I think I did what you or any sensible person would do. When you're attacked by a group of people fighting for your life, of course, you're going to tussle back and forth and try to just stay alive any way you can.
And you've been charged with trespassing on that property in the past. You have said that organizers of the event that you were attending gave you permission to walk through. Will you be able to prove that?
Both the Department of Natural Resources and the FBI have confirmed that I was attacked on public land. The issue of trespassing is that while I was crossing through the property earlier in the day, was whether or not I was trespassing. And yes, I can confirm that the event organizer gave me permission. He had received permission from the landowner. We actually have it in writing.
Just wanted to get you to kind of give us a deeper dive for this quote that you gave. You said there's nothing more American than charging a black man in his own attempted lynching. Dr.
King called blackness in America a stigmata. From the very founding documents of our nation, black folks were rendered as not only less than a person, but as property. So when we have these issues of property rights, whether we're talking about folks protesting in the streets, whether we're talking about whether or not I was trespassing on someone's land, the idea that property is somehow tantamount to the worth of my life is very American. And honestly, some folks feel like the only thing that happened that was wrong was that these men should have succeeded when they attacked me and accused me of trespassing on their property.
Mr. Hennessy also said last year that you were, quote, putting forth a false narrative about that day, a year after what you say was a threatened lynching. What do you want people to know about that day and its impact on you and beyond?
You know, I felt safe in my community. I am a respected figure. I've been a public figure, a human rights commissioner. Never did I imagine that folks would attack me and beat me and threaten me with a noose in 2020. I need folks to understand that these are issues that are still happening, that it's very important that we still are pushing society forward. We saw the passage of Stop Asian Hate Act in record time, but for decades we haven't been able to pass a federal anti-lynching act. We have to understand that this hate can't be tolerated.
Mr. Vox Booker, so appreciate your time tonight. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you. I appreciate you.
Still ahead here on Prime, another day of travel nightmares for thousands. One airline scrapping half of all scheduled flights. A fourth responding Capitol Police officer commits suicide after the disgrace that was January 6th. Meanwhile, Congress takes action to honor the heroes who fought that mob back. And Simone Biles, they don't call her the GOAT for nothing. We take a look by the numbers. But first, our tweet of the day. Lady Gaga, like so many others, wishing the one and only Tony Bennett a very happy birthday. He turned 95 today.
All right, here we go. You ready? Let's do it.
Yes, it's the show America wants and America needs right now.
This is What Would You Do? Let's go. How are you?
How cute.
Yes.
So what will you be watching Saturdays on ABC News Live?
What would you do?
Hey, I guess I just found out.
The What Would You Do Marathon, 12 to 6 Eastern, every Saturday on ABC News Live.
My favorite show.
This is what being live is all about. This is ABC News Live.
All right, we're gonna move back. Let's move back.
We're surrounded by people
squeezing into this bomb shelter.
We're on an urgent delivery run.
Not afraid to go there.
So my question, Mr. President, what are you so afraid of?
Breaking news, live events.
This is the moment.
Streaming straight to you, anytime, anywhere.
You just met one friend right here.
You're watching ABC News Live. Thanks for streaming with us.
He calls himself the BTK Strangler.
BTK was a monster.
My father's a good guy, Boy Scout leader, president of the church, and then there's a knock on my door. He says, your dad has been arrested as BTK. I was like, I think I'm gonna pass out.
Your father is confessing to being a serial killer.
Now, the daughter of a notorious serial killer. Her story, My Father, BTK. The 2020 event special, Friday at 9/8 Central on ABC. GMA Friday. Get ready, America, because Nelly's about to ignite your summer weekend. It's Nelly with special guests performing for you. Friday on Good Morning America, sponsored by Caesars Rewards.
Are you ready?
People love a good scandal.
Erica Jane,
the Real Housewives star accused with her husband of staging a fake divorce.
Thomas Girardi accused of embezzlement.
The biggest question is, did she know?
The Housewife and the Hustler, only on Hulu.
Right now, with so much at stake, Sunday mornings, this is the place. Taking on all the tough questions. Straightforward reporting. No spin, no hype, no bull. Thank you for making ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos the #1 Sunday morning news show versus the competition.
Welcome to This Week.
Now, with so much on the line, more Americans are turning to David Muir and ABC's World News Tonight than any other newscast across all of television.
Welcome back, everyone. Simone Biles making that comeback today at the Tokyo Olympics, capping off a remarkable Team USA run for the star gymnast. We take a look by the numbers. Biles' bronze medal win in the balance beam gives her 2 medals for the Tokyo Olympics, along with the silver in the team competition. Combined with her 5 medals in the 2016 Games in Brazil, that makes 7 total Olympic medals for Biles, tying her with Shannon Miller for the most medals won by a U.S. female gymnast. She's also a 15-time individual world champion from non-Olympic year competitions dating back to 2013. Biles had hoped to take home up to 5 medals in these games as she qualified for every event, but of course she withdrew from 4 competitions as she said that her mind and body were out of sync as the games began. The 24-year-old hasn't said yet if this will be her final Olympics, saying today that she's not yet thinking about whether she'll compete again in 2024 in Paris. But she said of today's win, quote, "I wasn't expecting to walk away with the medal. I was just going out there doing this for me." Congratulations, Simone. And we still have lots to get to here on Prime tonight. The ABC News exclusive. The couple who claims that they were harassed by former eBay employees, they are now speaking out. And the investigation into a shooting this morning at a Smile Direct Club in Tennessee. But first, a look at our top trending stories on abcnews.com.
World News Now.
And America This Morning.
The best new video.
The breaking news overnight.
Emergency crews called to the town of Surfside.
U.S. airstrikes hitting targets in Iraq and Syria.
The stories people are talking about.
You don't want to shave your legs? Don't. I was going to say.
Oh my. Got it.
And what to expect in the day ahead.
ABC World News Now and America This Morning.
Starting at 2 a.m. Eastern.
Up all night to keep you up to date.
Now, when it matters most, the straightforward facts. ABC News is America's #1 news. Good Morning America, #1 in the morning, 9 years running. World News Tonight with David Muir, #1 in the evening with America's most watched newscast. 2020, the #1 news magazine on Friday nights. The View, the #1 daytime talk show. And ABC News Live, #1 in streaming news. ABC News is America's #1 news.
I could tell you that I'm not a person who wants to die. I'm not the strongest every day, but I'm not the weakest either. And I won't break.
Whitney Houston, she had the ingredients.
Just pow. She was the queen. A crown was given to her, and crowns are heavy.
You think it's easy being a superstar? You have no idea.
Superstar Whitney Houston. Wednesday night, August 11th on ABC and streaming on Hulu.
This is what being live is all about. This is ABC News Live.
All right, we're gonna move back. Let's move back.
We're surrounded by people
squeezing into this bomb shelter.
We're on an urgent delivery run.
Not afraid to go there.
So my question, Mr. President, what are you so afraid of?
Breaking news, live events.
This is the moment.
Streaming straight to you, anytime, anywhere.
You just met one friend right here.
You're watching ABC News Live. Thanks for streaming with us.
BTK was a monster.
Friday, the daughter of a notorious serial killer.
There's a knock on my door. He says, your dad has been arrested as BTK.
Her story.
I think I'm gonna pass out.
The 2020 event, Friday at 9, 8 Central on ABC.
This week, it's time to wake up with
Good Morning America.
Ryan Reynolds. Plus, GMA's great Summer Rise and Shine tour rolls on.
Rise and shine.
So, where will we be next? Just wait until you see. Good Morning America this week.
I want you to know directly from me that I never touched anyone inappropriately or made inappropriate sexual advances.
New York Governor Andrew Cuomo is denying allegations after the state attorney general released findings from an investigation.
Governor Andrew Cuomo sexually harassed multiple women, and in doing so violated federal and state law.
Officials say a 4-month investigation revealed the governor created a toxic work environment by making repeated offensive, sexually suggestive, unwelcome gender-based comments and inappropriately touching a number of current and former employees, plus a state trooper assigned to his security detail.
These were not isolated incidents. They were part of a pattern.
I've been making the same gesture in public all my life. I actually learned it from my mother and from my father. It is meant to convey warmth, nothing more.
Are you now calling on him to resign?
Yes.
And if he doesn't resign, do you believe he should be impeached and removed from office?
Let's take one thing at a time here.
A workplace shooting in Antioch, Tennessee has left employees of a Smile Direct Club there injured.
We believe that a day shift employee walked in just before 6 during shift change. The overnight shift people leaving, the day shift people coming in, and for whatever reason, the man opened fire. Multiple shots were fired inside the club. A total of 3 employees were hit.
The suspect was fatally shot by police. One of the victims is in critical condition.
It's another day of canceled flights of both American and Spirit Airlines. American says this time around it's because of weather, but at Spirit it's a mix of things: weather, not enough staff, IT issues. It's left passengers stranded without flights home. Lines are long at check-in counters.
I will never, ever book with this airline again, ever.
This as more Americans are taking to the skies. The TSA screening a record number of people Sunday, the highest since the start of the pandemic.
The Senate has voted to award medals of honor to the Capitol Police and the Metropolitan Police Department for protecting Congress during the January 6th attack. The legislation is now on its way to the president for his signature.
We will never forget Officer Harry Dunn, who told his story again last week at the House Select Committee, recounting how he fought against the violent mob for hours. And after it was all over, broke down in tears, telling fellow officers in the rotunda that he'd been called the N-word multiple times that day. And he looked at his friend, his fellow officer, and said, "Is this America?" No, Officer Dunn, that was not America. But these medals that recognize your bravery, this is America.
2 more officers who responded to January's attack on the U.S. Capitol have died by suicide, bringing the total number to 4. Officer Kyle DeFreytag had been with the D.C. Police Department for 5 years. Officer Gunther Hashida was an 18-year veteran.
China's biggest gaming company, Tencent Holdings, says it will limit gaming time for minors and ban children under the age of 12 from making in-game purchases. The move comes after a state media article called games, quote, spiritual opium. Tencent is also calling for the industry to consider banning anyone under 12 from playing games.
Now to an ABC News exclusive with a Massachusetts couple who claims that they were subjected to a vicious campaign of harassment by former eBay executives. And what they say they went through is nothing short of bizarre. ABC's Rebecca Jarvis has more.
David and Ina Steiner, a couple living in a quiet suburb outside of Boston, say it started with graffiti spray painted on their fence.
It was really disturbing. It just didn't make any sense.
The pair run a 22-year-old website dedicated to e-commerce news that could be critical of eBay's policies. Prosecutors allege that's what made them a target.
I started getting harassed online through Twitter, through unwanted email subscriptions, and these were really disturbing emails.
But according to a recently filed lawsuit, that was just the beginning.
We got a phone call from a shop in Arizona that said that they couldn't deliver the wet specimen that we had ordered. And not having any idea what a wet specimen was, I asked her, She said it was an embalmed pig fetus.
The Steiners allege they became the victims of a harassment campaign that would leave them fearing for their lives, orchestrated by former executives of eBay, the e-commerce giant worth more than $47 billion. Speaking out exclusively to Good Morning America, the couple and their lawyer detail what they call in the complaint a systematic campaign to emotionally and psychologically torture the pair in order to stifle their reporting on eBay.
You also received cockroaches, a book on surviving the loss of a spouse, a funeral wreath. Your neighbors received pornography that was addressed to David. Did it cross your mind at any point that eBay could be behind this?
No, it was a psychopath. Who could devise these torturous packages and the depravity? The messages, if you read the language, I never in a million years would have thought it was a company.
One package even allegedly contained this disturbing mask from the movie Saw.
This is the mask the killer wears right before he kidnaps, tortures, and kills his victim.
At one point, they say eBay employees attempted to place a tracking device on their car.
We still can't believe it, and we still want to know why.
Prosecutors have also criminally charged 6 eBay employees and a contractor with cyberstalking. 5 have pleaded guilty, 2 maintain their innocence and await trial.
Rebecca, thank you. Our next guest is retired Army Lieutenant Colonel who mostly operated behind the scenes. That is until the morning of July 25th, 2019, when Army Lieutenant Colonel Alexander S. Vindman, who was working as a Russia military expert at the National Security Council at the time, was listening in on a phone call between then President Donald Trump and Ukraine's newly elected President Volodymyr Zelensky. As history notes, that was the infamous call that spurred the first impeachment process against then-President Trump and changed Lieutenant Colonel Vindman's life forever. His story and never-before-shared details are all covered in his new book, Here, Right Matters, An American Story. Retired Army Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman, kind enough to join us tonight. Thank you so much for coming on the show tonight, sir.
Thank you for having me.
So let's start from the beginning of that call, right? So as it's been stated, then President Trump was congratulating the new president of Ukraine, Zelensky. The relationship at that point was a bit tense because the Trump administration at that time had been withholding finances from Ukraine. So give us a sense of the tone at the beginning of the call, and that at what point you decide something's not quite right here.
Sure. So it was set up as a congratulatory call, similar to the one I set up for him when Zelensky was elected president back in the April timeframe. But immediately, as the president joined the line, you could tell by his tone that this was not going to be a typical congratulatory call. The president was, as he would describe, monotone, low energy, and really a reluctant participant in the call. And only, so to me, that set off alarm bells. But really, the call went from bad to worse progressively, and only at the point where Zelensky perked up and said, hey, we want to buy additional weapons, and Donald Trump responded with, yes, but I'd like you to do us a favor, though. That's when the call went completely off, not just off script, but off of anything that, I guess, that I had ever heard of before.
Kind of off the rails, so to speak.
Completely off the rails.
And that's the point when he starts talking about potentially investigating the Bidens?
That's exactly right.
And so what was he saying at that moment?
So the president had started by touting how much the United States does for Ukraine, which is true. He also cast a shadow over the kind of support that the European Union and European allies were offering. And he was just setting the conditions for the big ask, which was, if you want us to continue to provide, if you want these javelins, if you want these weapons, if you want continued U.S. support, if you want your White House visit, you have to do this investigation. And how are you responding? That you're cringing, you're aghast? So my immediate reaction was the last piece of the puzzle fell into place. In the preceding months, the many preceding months, you could see this enterprise unfold. Ambassador Yovanovitch was fired based on this rumor spread by Rudolph Giuliani, the president's personal counsel, and There were some stories that were circulating by John Solomon in The Hill. Ultimately, Don Jr., the president's son, got involved, and that's what really got Ambassador Ivanovich canned. But none of this really necessarily added up to the president. This could have been cronies looking to ingratiate themselves with the president. Giuliani, Sondland, all these other characters were emerging. Mick Mulvaney, the president's chief of staff, but not until that phone call was it clear that the president was the driving force. And of course, as soon as having put all the pieces together, I knew what my immediate reaction needed to be, which was to report this to try to see if we really get our relationship back on track, and to not let the president of the United States subvert the very foundations of our democracy, a free and fair election. And that's what I did. That's why I reported the phone call.
And in fact, you write in your book, I knew what I had to do. I'd known from the moment I heard the president say what he said, regardless of any impact on the president, the domestic and foreign policy consequences, or personal costs. I had no choice but to report what I'd heard. Did you have any idea at that time just what the personal cost was going to be?
Well, I certainly had the idea of a clear-eyed view of the gravity of the moment. When I went into my twin brother's office en route to talk to the senior legal official, the person that I was hoping was going to speak to the president and get him to reverse course, I walked into Eugene's office and I said, close the door, had a little dramatic pause, make sure I had his attention. I told him, Eugene, if what I'm about to tell you ever becomes public, the president will be impeached. Understanding the gravity of the situation, I also had some inkling of the potential consequences, but I thought those would be rather limited maybe to my tenure at the NSC. I didn't really necessarily kind of identify that this was going to be a complete upheaval, because this is all private, behind closed doors, through official channels, and I really didn't have any idea that this was going to become public.
And as you stated, that's what ended up happening. You then end up being called as a witness in the House impeachment proceedings. Many of the Republicans were very critical of you, to say the least, basically saying that you were coming after then President Trump. At one point, you said that you had considered moving your family onto a military base for protection. How did you make it through that time, and how difficult was it?
It was very difficult. It was partially extremely difficult because the White House, my house, the house I was working on a daily basis, was attacking me. Those attack points that you heard coming out of Congress, that you heard coming out of Laura Ingraham, that you had coming out of Tucker Carlson, all these, they were on the same script, and it's because the White House had sent out attack points. They slipped up and sent it to the wrong individuals, and it leaked to the press. So that made things very challenging from a work environment. I still thought I could get things done, but at home, I also had to deal with letters coming to the home, threatening emails and things of that nature, which maybe I probably was a little bit cavalier based on my training, spending time in combat zones in Moscow, where it was a very kind of beleaguered environment. I tended to cast those aside and think laser focused on what the mission was, which is basically do the best I can to faithfully execute my oath, provide testimony. My wife, on the other hand, had to deal with those real threats and the fact that we had a young daughter at home, and it was a challenge. And that was just the beginning of the story. Obviously, this ended up ending my career, and had to rebuild and start from scratch.
And you talk about your training. Obviously, you served 21 years in the Army, survived an IED attack in Iraq, went on to get a Purple Heart as a result of that. You talk throughout the book about your devotion to the Constitution and how you knew immediately that it was your duty to report what you heard on that call. Even in contrast to your own father giving you advice, right, that you needed to support the president. Any doubts in your mind at all that you did the right thing, or do you question it at all even now?
I don't question it. I think one of the lessons I guess I tried to communicate through the book is this notion that sometimes you just have to take your own counsel. You're maybe the only person. Just like in that moment, I was responsible for my portfolio. I was really the person responsible for making the kind of complaint that I did. You have to take your own counsel. Your parents, your spouse might want you to take something of a more safer road, something that doesn't burn bridges with both the chief executive and maybe the service. But I knew what the right thing to do was. I knew what I could live with and what I couldn't live with. I knew that I wanted to make sure I could look my daughter in the eye and not have to equivocate, not have to whitewash, the way my actions, like so many other people have done. And I went with what I thought was right.
In so many ways, you kind of encapsulate the American dream. You immigrated to this country from Ukraine with your dad and brothers in 1979, went to college, served in the Army, go on to serve at the highest levels of the National Security Council. You're obviously a Ukrainian American, but your allegiance is with America. What would you say to those who are immigrants, who are talking about the ideals of the American dream?
This is the one of the many threads that unite all Americans, is that all of us are immigrants, whether it's our generation or previous generation. Very few of us could claim original native roots. And I think what I tried to do with the story about my immigrant background is to kind of revive this view that we are all immigrants. We all came here with the same hopes and aspirations of the hopes of prosperity in the United States. And I think that was a formative experience in me and developing me, defining me as a person, recognizing that, frankly, other places in the world have a much harder go of it than the United States. We have it quite good in spite of our shortcomings, and we need to not just preserve what we have, but we need to continue to make steps forward, continue to form that more perfect union. And I think that my military experience, the way my father raised me, all of these experiences that I read about in the book come together in my actions in this pivotal moment and in the aftermath.
Retired Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman is the author of the new book, Here, Right Matters, an American Story, available now. We thank you so much for your time. Appreciate you joining us in studio.
Thank you.
And before we go tonight, our image of the day. This Mesopotamian clay cone is one of several looted Iraqi antiquities that were given back to Iraq by the U.S. Iraq's culture minister says that the U.S. plans to return some 17,000 archaeological treasures dating back 4,000 years that were looted in recent decades. That is our show for this hour. Be sure to stay tuned to ABC News Live for more context and analysis of the day's top stories. Thanks so much for streaming with us. Coming up in the next hour, details on a new eviction moratorium with so many on the brink of being kicked out of their homes, and how the masks and schools debate can literally differ from town to town in the same area. Stay with us.
Now, when it matters most, the straightforward facts. ABC News is America's #1 news. Good Morning America, #1 in the morning, 9 years running. World News Tonight with David Muir, #1 in the evening with America's most watched newscast. 2020, the #1 news magazine on Friday nights. The View, the #1 daytime talk show. And ABC News Live, #1 in streaming news. ABC News is America's #1 news.
The most powerful stories of our time, anytime. Nightline.
Now streaming on ABC News Live. 2020. True crime. Cinematic. Real-life drama. Stunning. The unthinkable. Follow the clues. The Hunt. True crime. 2020. Now streaming on ABC News Live.
Admit it. These days, what you need to know
seems to change just about every day.
What is it that you really want to know, need to know?
To help you not just get through your day,
but to make the most of it. Feel smarter.
Feel better.
Feel happier.
Well, how about a third hour of Good Morning America?
GMA 3, what you need to know. Now streaming on ABC News Live.
It's all about you.
I know what happened, and I'm not guilty.
Why the fascination with criminal trials? Figure out what's really out there.
She revealed she had murdered his family.
I know in my heart they did this.
It's the time of suspicion.
The ending's really tough.
You don't know whether truth is going to be difficult to find. unless you try to find it.
This is what being live is all about. This is ABC News Live.
All right, we're gonna move back. Let's move back.
We're surrounded by people
squeezing into this bomb shelter.
We're on an urgent delivery run.
Not afraid to go there.
So my question, Mr. President, what are you so afraid of?
Breaking news, live events.
This is the moment.
Streaming straight to you, anytime, anywhere.
You just met one friend right here.
You're watching ABC News Live. Thanks for streaming with us.
Hey everyone, I'm Lindsay Davis. Thanks so much for streaming with us. We're monitoring several developments here at ABC News at this hour. The Pentagon was locked down for quite some time today after a man armed with a knife attacked a police officer at a bus station outside. Sadly, that officer later died. The attacker was subdued when officers fired at him, killing him. Now the FBI is investigating what prompted this tragedy in front of what's supposed to be one of the most secure sites in America. In Idaho, there is a growing search for a 5-year-old who's been missing now for a week. Search teams say that they are working around the clock to try and find Michael Vaughn and have called in additional personnel to try to find him. And America's largest city will soon make you show proof of COVID vaccination if you want to do things like eat indoors or go to the gym. This as cases from the Delta variant continue to surge. President Biden calling it a largely preventable tragedy, and the data bears that assertion out. Now to the developing story here in New York. The Attorney General released a report finding Governor Andrew Cuomo violated state and federal laws by sexually harassing nearly a dozen women. The announcement follows a 4-month investigation into allegations from multiple women. The governor now responding to the findings. Ariel Reshef is in Albany with more.
Tonight, the independent investigation reaching a sweeping conclusion.
Governor Andrew Cuomo sexually harassed current and former New York State employees by engaging in unwelcome and non-consensual touching and making numerous offensive comments of a suggestive and sexual nature that created a hostile work environment for women.
11 women coming forward to accuse the governor. Investigators finding them all to be credible.
I believe them.
The team, assembled by New York State Attorney General Letitia James, spoke to 179 people over 5 months, collecting 74,000 pieces of evidence. Today, they accuse the governor of violating state and federal laws, presenting their findings in stark detail.
In the executive mansion, the governor hugged executive assistant number 1 and reached under her blouse to grab her breast. This was the culmination of a pattern of inappropriate sexual conduct, including numerous close and intimate hugs, where the governor held her so closely that her breasts were pressed against his body.
Investigators say a state trooper, a member of Cuomo's own security detail, described a pattern of harassment.
In an elevator, while standing behind the trooper, he ran his finger from her neck down her spine and said, "Hey, you." Another time, she was standing holding the door open for the governor. As he passed, he took his open hand and ran it across her stomach from her belly button to the hip where she keeps her gun. She told us that she felt completely violated.
And investigators say her account was corroborated by other state troopers who saw it all. And then there was Charlotte Bennett, an executive assistant who confided in Cuomo last year that she had been sexually assaulted in college. He allegedly asked her to describe what had happened, and investigators say it didn't stop there. Bennett filed a complaint, but the governor's staff allegedly buried it, and she ended up leaving her job. Today, Cuomo claimed he was only trying to counsel her because he has a close relative who was also sexually assaulted.
I thought I could help her work through a difficult time. I did ask her questions I don't normally ask people. I did ask her how she was doing and how she was feeling. And I did ask questions to try to see if she had positive, supportive dating relationships.
The governor declaring the investigation does a disservice to, quote, legitimate sexual harassment victims.
I never touched anyone inappropriately or made inappropriate sexual advances.
In a highly produced video, he showed pictures of himself hugging various people and of politicians embracing other politicians. The message, nothing to see here.
I try to put people at ease. I try to make them smile. I try to connect with them. And I try to show my appreciation and my friendship. I now understand that there are generational or cultural perspectives that, frankly, I hadn't fully appreciated. And I have learned from this.
Today, Charlotte Bennett tweeting a terse response: resign Governor Cuomo. Her call echoed by both New York senators and House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. And tonight, reporters asking President Biden.
Are you now calling on him to resign?
Yes.
Just a very simple and matter-of-fact yes there from the president. Ariel Reshef joins us now from Albany, the capital of New York. Ariel, we just heard from President Biden. He thinks that Cuomo should resign. But so far, the governor has been unwilling to do that. So what happens next?
Well, Lindsay, tonight it is looking more and more like Governor Cuomo will be impeached by the state legislature. The Assembly Speaker saying it has become abundantly clear that Cuomo has lost the confidence of the Assembly's Democratic majority and that he can no longer remain in office.
And also explain to our viewers who became very familiar with impeachment on the federal level in recent years why, if it happened, it would look much different in New York.
Yeah, so we're all getting up to speed on this. The governor and his aides essentially know, Lindsay, that if he were to be impeached, this would be the ball game here in Albany, different than what we see happen in Washington, D.C. And that is because the governor would have to essentially step back while he's mounting a defense. And insiders say that Governor Cuomo would possibly resign in that instance if he knows he'll be impeached. Lindsay?
Ariel Reshef, our thanks to you. With COVID cases rising, many parents are worried for their children as the new school year approaches, with many clashing over school guidelines and mask mandates. Steve Osinsami has the very latest.
It's back to school this morning across parts of Georgia, and Maddie Bosinski is worried.
You have kids in two schools, 2 miles apart, different protocols.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, as parents, we're just trying to navigate the noise.
Her children are going to class in Cobb County, Georgia, in the Atlanta suburbs, where she says her two different schools are making slightly different safety decisions, and where parents get to decide if their children wear masks.
When you went to school today, what happened?
None of the teachers were wearing masks. There was one. None of the administration was wearing masks. Only probably 60% of students were wearing masks. I was livid. You know, where are the people protecting our children after they have sacrificed for a year and a half?
The CDC changed its guidance last week, saying that because of a rise in new cases and the more contagious Delta variant, that it's a good idea once again for everyone in a K-12 school to wear a mask.
While we desperately want to be done with this pandemic, COVID-19 is clearly not done with us.
But from state to state and school district to school district, they're making different rules. And in every place, there are parents who disagree. In DeKalb County, Georgia, closer to Atlanta, masks are required.
It went surprisingly well. We had every student had their mask. They were riding the bus, they were in the classroom, and they even used it for the outside playground.
In Gwinnett County, Georgia, north of the city, school starts tomorrow, and they're requiring masks here too. But a number of parents are protesting at the school board. Philip Holloway, an Atlanta attorney with kids in school here, says he's hearing from dozens of parents and teachers trying to find ways to fight mask requirements in court.
Parents should be able to make the decision, you know, this is what I think is best for my child.
Here's what some of the schools are afraid of. What's happening at this charter school in North Carolina where masks weren't mandatory. More than a dozen people have already tested positive. More than 100 students and staff have had to quarantine. And now masks are required.
So much concern as kids are about to start heading back to school. Our thanks to Steve Osinsami for that. Now to the breaking news on the home front. The Biden administration is, in fact, taking action to limit evictions after enduring blistering criticism from many in his own party. As you know, that pandemic-induced moratorium expired on Saturday. Rachel Scott joins us now. And Rachel, what's the new plan and how soon would it be enacted?
Well, the CDC tonight making some news, announcing a new moratorium on evictions. This is going to be a 60-day extension, Lindsay, lasting until October 3rd. It will be targeting areas that have been hard hit by COVID-19. And congressional sources who were briefed on this measure tell me that it will affect approximately 90% of Americans. All of this coming after immense pressure from progressive Democrats who demanded that the White House take action, Lindsay.
But President Biden said that he doubted doubted the new moratorium would pass constitutional muster. Not a resounding endorsement, but explain to us his strategy.
Yeah, and the president just saying flat out today that he is actually expecting this to be challenged in court. But he says at the very least, while this is getting litigated in the courts, that it would provide some breathing room for millions of Americans who are at risk of eviction. And he's once again calling on states to start distributing the money that Congress set aside to help renters and landlords. Again, $47 billion. So far, $3 billion has been sent out, Lindsay.
Rachel Scott reporting in from the nation's capital. Thanks so much, Rachel. Now to the Olympics, where Simone Biles made her comeback in the Tokyo Games, taking home the bronze medal in the balance beam after pulling out of several events. ABC's James Longman is in Tokyo with the very latest.
Tonight, the return of a champion, Simone Biles catapulting herself among the ranks of Olympic greats. With the eyes of the world on her, she performed a near-flawless routine, taking home the bronze, her 7th medal. She's now tied with 90s phenom Shannon Miller as the most decorated American Olympic gymnast.
Well, I honestly wasn't even expecting to medal on beam. I just was trying to go out there and hit a good beam set and compete one more time at this Olympic Games.
In a week of twists and turns, Biles withdrew from the team final, stepping away for her mental health. It looked like the lights had dimmed for America's star gymnast, revealing on Instagram that she was experiencing a phenomenon called the twisties.
The only reason why I could do beam was because there was no twisting, so thank God for that.
And today, Biles saying that this bronze means more than all of her golds, a recognition of her resilience.
Resilience indeed. James Longman joins us now once again from Tokyo. And James, we want to put out a picture that you took today showing the crush of cameras around Biles after she competed. These athletes just under such intense scrutiny. But in the end, she overcame that pressure to get back out for one more event today.
Yeah, Lindsay, she really did. And the atmosphere in that arena, I can tell you, was absolutely extraordinary. You know, so many of these events, basically the stands are empty. But tonight, anyone who was able to get into that stadium to watch was there. Journalists, officials, anybody from the Olympic bubble. Even Thomas Bach, the IOC president, turned up, and he was sat actually right near us. He waited afterwards in order to give, I think, Simone Biles a gift. And I don't know what it looks like on television, but actually the proportions here are quite small. I mean, I was only sitting probably about 9 or 10 meters away from Simone Biles. She's got all these cameras around her, following her everywhere she goes. It was quite a thing to see. But I think for me, watching, one of the more special things was the camaraderie between these Olympians, between countries, especially when the Chinese are up there on the beam. You know, because Simone's qualifying score was lower, she went earlier, and she had to wait to see how all the other athletes would do. And Guan Chenchen, the Chinese 16-year-old, who's incredible, went last because she had the higher qualifying score. So it was a bit of a nail-biter. We didn't know where she was going to come in the final kind of order. And actually what happened was that young lady from China ended up getting gold, and she won. But on the sidelines, throughout her routine, Simone and Sinisa were cheering her on, knowing fully that if she did really well, she would knock Simone from silver to bronze. And that's what happened. But it was still wonderful to watch how much these athletes love their sport. And after everything Simone and Sinisa have been through this week, for them to be stood there cheering on the Chinese athletes, are surrounded by all these people watching and the whole world watching, that for me was probably the most special thing.
Really nice to hear that sportsmanship and camaraderie, as you say. James Longman, thanks so much. Comedian Kathy Griffin has certainly made a name for herself by pushing the envelope, not just up to the line, but oftentimes over it. And now, 4 years after the Trump mask scandal that nearly ended her career, Griffin is sharing startling revelations about addiction, mental health, and now a cancer diagnosis. Here's ABC's Juju Chang.
Turning the things you're not supposed to say into comedy put Griffin on the map. She toured the world performing stand-up.
I've been very open about what I call my dental work. You know, I'm not going to lie to you about that. I've got staples in my head right now.
But in 2017, many would say she crossed a line after TMZ published a photo of her holding a mask of President Trump covered in ketchup.
Outrage from all sides after that video of comedian Kathy Griffin.
Kathy Griffin in that image.
Nobody wants to see this. It wasn't funny, it didn't work.
The backlash was swift. Her tour canceled, endorsements pulled, friends walked away.
I think that emotionally, that was the most painful, to have so many friends that to this day haven't called. I would like to think that I would not behave that way. I think it's sad that many Americans were quiet at a time like during my photo when it probably would have been okay to kind of take a stand.
After her world tour, the darkness became overwhelming. Back home in Los Angeles, her addiction to prescription pills spun out of control.
How did that happen?
I have to be honest, it really kicked into high gear when the Trump thing happened. Prior to then, I'm going to say I was like dallying with a pill addiction in a way that wasn't good. But then after that happened, I just thought, who cares?
So bring us to the dark night when you decide, that's it, I'm checking out.
I took about 100 pills. I fell down 2 flights of stairs. And you know, I'm no spring chicken, honey, 59. I don't remember any of it. I then went back to bed. Then I looked at my body and I could see I had like lacerations and bruises and stuff. And I was like, oh, I didn't do it enough. Took a bunch more pills, fell down again, this time on like a marble floor. And then that time when I came to, even then I was like, okay, this isn't good.
From there, Kathy began one of her biggest battles, recovery.
The detox was nasty. I mean, it was months.
Griffin says it's been roughly a year since she kicked her addiction to prescription pills. Ironically, sobriety may have saved her life in more ways than one. It helped her discover a terrifying diagnosis.
There's no more Oxy, there's no more Vicodin. And so I was like, do I have arthritis? My joints are hurting. And so I went and I had a bunch of tests. And then the doctor said, we picked up a mass on your lung. Then they did a needle biopsy. I just found out that it's cancer, lung cancer, though I've never smoked. I like to be the exception to the rule.
Exactly. Oh my God.
I'm special.
Griffin had half her lungs surgically removed, and she's taking it all with her finely tuned sense of humor.
So what does the next chapter look like post-surgery for you?
You know, the beauty is I don't worry about that as much anymore. Not to sound cocky, but I think at this stage of the game, I think people know who I am. And I think it's okay for me to go, you know what, I'm going to see what comes in. I'm not going to chase it like I used to.
Our thanks to Juju Chang for bringing us her story. Still to come, how to raise strong women. Stay with us.
Now, when it matters most, the straightforward facts. ABC News is America's #1 news. Good Morning America, #1 in the morning, 9 years running. World News Tonight with David Muir, #1 in the evening with America's most watched newscast. 2020, the #1 news magazine on Friday nights. The View, the #1 daytime talk show. And ABC News Live, #1 in streaming news. ABC News is America's #1 news.
He calls himself the BTK Strangler.
BTK was a monster.
My father's a good guy, Boy Scout leader, president of the church, and then there's a knock on my door. He says, your dad has been arrested as BTK. I was like, I think I'm gonna pass out.
Your father is confessing to being a serial killer.
Now, the daughter of a notorious serial killer. Her story, My Father, BTK, the 2020 event special, Friday at 9/8 Central on ABC.
I could tell you that I'm not a person who wants to die. I'm not the strongest every day, but I'm not the weakest either. And I won't break.
Whitney Houston, she had the ingredients.
Just pow.
She was the queen. A crown was given to her, and crowns are heavy.
You think it's easy being a superstar? You have no idea.
Superstar Whitney Houston. Wednesday night, August 11th on ABC and streaming on Hulu.
All right, here we go. You ready? Let's do it.
Yes, it's the show America wants and America needs right now.
This is What Would You Do? Let's go. How are you?
Yes. So what will you be watching Saturdays on ABC News Live?
What would you do?
Hey, I guess I just found out.
The What Would You Do Marathon, 12 to 6 Eastern, every Saturday on ABC News Live.
My favorite show.
This is what being live is all about. This is ABC News Live.
All right, we're gonna move back. Let's move back.
We're surrounded by people
squeezing into this bomb shelter.
We're on an urgent delivery run.
Not afraid to go there.
So my question, Mr. President, what are you so afraid of?
Breaking news, live events.
This is the moment.
streaming straight to you, anytime, anywhere.
You just met one friend right here.
You're watching ABC News Live. Thanks for streaming with us. Welcome back. We're tracking several international headlines at this hour. A powerful explosion has rocked an upscale and fortified section of the Afghan capital of Kabul. The blast apparently targeted the country's acting defense minister, but he was not harmed. The attack is believed to be a message to the government as it fights the Taliban. The COVID deja vu has even reached Wuhan, the first city that dealt with this endless nightmare. Chinese authorities have ordered mass testing of all 11 million in the city after the Delta variant has now reached there. Flights and trains in and out of that city have also been halted. And the free climber who even went to jail for his curious hobby, he's done it again. George Thompson climbed this 36-story tower in London unaided. He reached the top in less than half an hour. He says that he did it to raise awareness about climate change. Police rushed to the scene but said Thompson was gone by the time they arrived. Joining us now to talk about how to shape tomorrow's future female leaders is Dr. Marissa Porges, the head at the Baldwin School and the author of What Girls Need, How to Raise Bold, Courageous, and Resilient Women. Dr. Porges, thanks so much for talking with us tonight.
Thanks for having me, Lindsay. Great to be here.
So you were a former White House strategist and naval flight officer, and now you're the head of one of the premier schools for girls. So you're really uniquely qualified and positioned to talk about just what girls need. What motivated you to write this book?
Frankly, it was the girls at my school. I was inspired by the fact that I get the chance every day to lead a community of about 600 young women from pre-kindergarten all the way through grade 12. And I realized that in the course of my conversations with them, I was sharing stories about my time in the Navy, my time at the White House, my time in Afghanistan. And before long, I realized that a lot of the lessons I wish I'd learned when I was their age, I didn't pick up until much later. And as I was sharing with them those lessons and research about how women lead differently than men and how we need to lean into our superpowers as strong, independent women, I realized there's a message I wanted to share, not just with the girls at Baldwin, but with girls everywhere, and thus the book.
And in this current climate, we're certainly seeing more women speak on the challenges that they face in the workplace. Let's just take a look at this TikTok video that has garnered more than 400,000 views. It's called Just a Woman Writing an Email. In your book, you shared a similar experience. I'm curious to know your advice for girls trying to navigate in a male-dominated world.
Yeah, I mean, watching that TikTok video just as a reminder that for so many women at any stage of our career, we've had that moment, that sense of imposter syndrome, that sense of insecurity, that self-doubt. So first, for girls and women out there, you're not alone. I can remember the first meeting I had with the President of the United States, President Obama, sitting across the table outside the Oval Office. And in the course of the hour, suddenly my confidence just left me. And I was filled with second guessing, self-doubt, and the question about did I deserve to be there? I think there are things that we can do from an early age, and my book gives us tricks and skills that we can develop through practice, including digging into our competitive spirit, making it a game, making the art of winning at work or in any context just something that we do each and every day. There are little ways we can do that for our girls and as young women and as women at any stage that I think are really important. And I think it's about starting with a candid conversation of what works best for girls everywhere.
And you also explore the art of asking. For example, you found that gender impacts negotiations and that women often face backlash when they try to negotiate salaries, so much so that they often avoid the process from the start. How detrimental is that to a female's growth?
Well, I mean, just think that still in 2021, the gender wage gap says an average woman makes about 80 cents to the dollar of what a man would make in the same job. And it starts because in your very first job, fewer women compared with their male peers negotiate that first salary. I can remember when I left the military and joined the Pentagon as a civilian, it wasn't until months later that I realized I was being paid less and actually had worse medical benefits than my male colleagues because I simply didn't know the art and the practice of asking. There are things we can practice with our girls from elementary school that will help them get used to asking for what they need, asking for what they deserve, and do it in a way that feels comfortable for women so we avoid that sense of backlash. There's tricks in the book about how to make it not just about ourselves, but about the people in the team we're working with. Things that make even introverted women and girls feel most comfortable asking for a salary bump, a different time of day to have a meeting, a different need for their vacation or for their family life at home. These are all things that if we get girls from elementary and even early teenage years to practice a little bit each day, when they get out for that first job, they won't have as much of a hang up and a holdback from doing it in a way that works for them and avoids gender gaps and wage differences later on too.
And you also specifically analyzed some of the gender disparities within higher education. Your research found that, quote, approximately 77% of teachers are women, but most of the senior officials and administrators at schools are male. As the head of an all-girls school, how important is it to see representation of women in leadership positions like yourself?
It's incredibly important. Seeing you here on the show today, seeing the women reporters, seeing a female vice president, seeing the women at the Olympics. These are incredibly critical moments for our young girls. For girls, especially more than boys, seeing it is believing it. Understanding that you can get there too, because you understand that you watch someone else do it ahead of you. It's why at Baldwin, we actually build in lessons on female scientists, female artists, female athletes, because we want our girls from a very young age to understand that any door is open to them. It's why I'd suggest for every parent, father, mother out there watching, turn on the Olympics, get an article out and say, hey girls, look, there are more women athletes at the Olympics for the US right now than men. And it's because, they had role models ahead of them, and the next generation needs those role models too. It's an incredibly powerful thing we can do for the next generation.
That idea of you have to see it to be it. What advice would you give to mothers like me raising a young son? What's one concept in particular that young boys should have instilled in them as they're growing up in order to help foster this mindset that women deserve a seat at the table?
And it's about the men too in our lives. And as having a young son at home myself, that is on my mind. And there's a couple things we can do. First, it's about, feeling how we're role modeling these actions of building seats for the women in our lives at home, for the daughters and the wives and the sisters and around the table. They need to be part of the conversation as much as the boys. It's also about finding examples in our own life and celebrating them, not just the role models we see on TV or at the Olympics or on the podium of the White House, but in our daily life, celebrating aunts, celebrating sisters, celebrating wives when they have moments of success. Showing our boys by example that this is a critical part of everyday life is a really, incredibly personal, intimate, and powerful way to exemplify for them that that's what we think is important and we want to see in them when they grow up. So it does start at a young age with my toddler at home, and Lindsay, your son as well.
And an adorable picture of your son, by the way, already promoting just what girls need. Dr. Porges, we thank you for speaking with us today. Your book, What Girls Need, How to Raise Bold, Courageous, and Resilient Women, is out today wherever books are sold. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Finally, tonight, right down the line is really the only way to describe what one weekend golfer managed to accomplish, and she did it not just once, but twice. Our Will Gans has the story.
Just when golf fans thought they'd seen it all, not even Happy Gilmore pulled off what Jenny Seppi just did. The Massachusetts athlete celebrating a weekend golfers can only dream of. A 7:30 a.m. tee time for her match play tournament at Salem Country Club, which she won, before rushing to the Bass Rocks Country Club in Gloucester, about half an hour northeast. Jenny playing in another tournament there where, despite rain and nasty winds, she shot an 84 to pick up her second championship trophy of the day.
I was just taking one shot at a time. I didn't get ahead of myself.
Marianne Doan was paired with Jenny for the final round in Gloucester, finishing in second place, 26 strokes behind her friend.
She can chip like no one I've ever seen. She putts unbelievably, and she does hit the ball a long way.
The folks at Bass Rocks pushing back the tee time to allow Jenny to make it in time for the final round.
Amazing friends, a lot of wonderful memories, and this is one that hopefully one day, if I have grandchildren and I'm in the rocking chair and I no longer can play golf, I can at least tell them the story.
Marianne says it was impossible not to root for her friend of 2 decades.
She's just as good a golfer as she is a person.
I think that anything is possible if you put your mind to it, and if I can encourage any little girl to look like me or anything, dream big, and you can do anything you want.
Certainly can. Our thanks to Will for that story. That is our show for tonight. Be sure to stay tuned to ABC News Live for more context and analysis of the day's top stories. I'm Lindsay Davis. Thank you so much for streaming with us. Have a great night.